Hello, everybody. This is Andrew Crane with Central Metro Realty, and today's 10-minute topic is avoiding fraud, how to verify sellers in a digital world. So we had a top Central Metro agent that got a lead from a friend who is another realtor in the industry. This other realtor had put a marketing email out and had received a solicitation from a seller who wanted to sell a piece of property. The friend agent didn't have the time to take care of this, and so the friend called one of our Central Metro agents and said, "Hey, look, we've got a relatively straightforward, easy transaction, vacant lot, and we want it should be a relatively easy deal. So would you please take this?" Other key points to note is the seller is out of state. The seller wanted to quickly sell this undeveloped residential lot for about $140,000. An important note, the lot's about an hour drive from a Central Metro agent, and the seller lead explains that they want to move on as quickly as possible. It was an investment, they were going to build a house, now they're not going to do that anymore. Okay, so as our Central Metro agent was preparing the listing, they reached out to the seller, right? Got their information over the phone, verified tax records, and made sure that they were who they said they were, did their best to figure out what their goals were for the property, how to best market it, etc. And then they went out and began the listing process. Through those marketing efforts, the Central Metro agent was able to get a buyer, and that buyer was represented by an agent who'd been practicing for over 10 years. The buyer specifically turned out to be a seasoned residential developer, someone who had bought plenty of vacant lots over the years and had built a number of homes and sold them off. So 1 week prior to closing, the seller started acting a little strange, right? They became a little bit difficult to get a hold of. They changed their phone number suddenly, and then they wanted to use a remote closing and started claiming to want to use their own notary. And a red flag was sent up when the seller suddenly stated, "Look, using my own notary is the same as using the notary that's provided by the title company." And our Central Metro agent pushed back on that, and it became kind of a tug of war. And our Central Metro agent said, "You know what, something's going on here. I'm going to reach out to the Central Metro agent helpline at 737-249-9010 and talk to my broker or manager and figure out what's going on because something smells a little bit off." Okay, so the investigation starts the moment the Central Metro agent calls us, and it's important to understand that time is of the essence, right? All of the information that we found out happened in 1 business day because the entire team was working together to try and get to a resolution on this issue. While we were trying to gather information, the fraudulent seller happened to actually call the Central Metro agents to try and negotiate terms or figure something out, and we were able to get that fraudulent seller, potentially fraudulent seller, on the phone. During that phone call, there was a number of erroneous claims made by the seller. They claimed they were a professional investor, and they claimed that not using their own notary was going to be a deal killer. And at that point, we realized, okay, this person obviously is not behaving in a consistent manner with a traditional seller, and they would absolutely, they're absolutely making some strange claims, and we think we're pretty sure that this is a fraudulent seller. So once that became apparent, we reached out to the title company and notified them of what we thought was a fraudulent seller. The title company was able to begin their internal investigation, but they did ask us to wait because the worst thing that could possibly happen is you have an actual legitimate seller and a legitimate buyer, and if you go ahead and notify the legitimate buyer's party that there could be a fraudulent seller, then that could scare everybody, and then you would in fact harm the legitimate seller if they were. But in this case, they were not. So the plan was developed to wait. Once the title company did their investigation, then we were going to move on. So the big question, did it close? No. The title company was able to verify that the seller was fraudulent. They even found the original owner, the actual owner of the property, and were able to contact them and tell them that they were almost a victim of a scam. Fortunately, we were able to notify all parties appropriately, and luckily for us, the buyer, while disappointed, was upset, and they were glad that they weren't drug into a scam. They were also glad that we were able to catch this before, they wired $140,000 off into nowhere. The title company was able to return the earnest money to the buyer, and the title company then notified us that this is a relatively common scam. So when it comes to red flags, these are some big ones to consider, right? The property was on the edge of the agent's known market area. Well, that's tough because for an agent, you may not know the space, you may not know the market, you may not know what's going on. And so it's really hard to be an expert everywhere. So if something's on the edge of your market area, it might be a good time to refer that out. Also, some things that the fraudulent scammers are relying on is that you're not familiar with the market area. They have undeveloped lots so that there's no one to check if anybody's home. They're also relying on an out-of-state closing or remote closing, so you can't verify their identity. Also, using their own notary is a big red flag. If somebody starts arguing that they want to use their own notary, beware, because you have to understand that all the information that was verified over the phone by a Central Metro agent is publicly available information. So the scammer was using that publicly available information to steal the identity of the actual seller, or the actual owner of the property, excuse me. And if you have a person that's willing to behave in such an egregious, fraudulent manner, there's no reason to believe that that person would also uphold the standards and practices of a notary and the ethics of a notary. So the assumption is if someone's willing to steal someone's identity and act as a fraudulent seller of a property, that that person would also not behave in a manner consistent with using a notary. You won't be able to identify who they are, and then they're just off there just acting unprofessionally. So it's important that you look out for those things. So let's talk about what almost happened. At closing, the legitimate buyer would have wired those funds directly to the scammer, right? And that scammer would have had $140,000 wired directly to them, and you can't ever get that back. It's gone, right? Those funds are unrecoverable. Also, the buyer who was legitimately trying to buy the property wouldn't own the property. And then the actual owner could end up with a cloud on their title. So who's harmed? Everyone in the transaction. The legitimate buyer, the actual owner of the property, all of the agents and brokers involved, of course, because now we have to clean up this mess, and then ultimately the title company who is in there trying to verify who's what, right? So it's important that we all do our part to maintain the integrity of the real estate profession and do your due diligence, okay? So let's talk about what to watch out for going forward. This scam is absolutely most likely to happen with vacant property or undeveloped residential lots, mainly because there's nobody there to check who's home. There's no way to figure out whether or not you have a neighbor there or if anybody knows anything about the property. Also, in cases of deceased or power of attorney, it's common, if somebody files probate, then you could have a scammer go out there and pretend to be the deceased. Similarly, in cases of a divorce, if there's a divorce decree filed in public court, then what ends up happening is you could have one party masquerading as one of the divorced parties, and then they're trying to sell off assets of the other and things. So just be cautious of those. For best practices, it's best to try and meet the person at the property, right? You want to know who you're meeting with, get their ID, verify that they are who they say they are, and also at the property so that you can verify ownership. It's really important, just the best practice. Sometimes it's not possible, especially if you work a large market area, but you got to do your due diligence. When in doubt, reach out. Of course, the reason that we're talking about this today is because it's a common occurrence that's more and more prevalent here in today's marketplace, especially the online world. But the things that we're happy about is the Central Metro Realty agent trusted their instincts, and they reached out to us and said, hey, something smells funny here. I need some help. I'd like to communicate with all the parties and figure out what's going on and how to solve this problem. What's really important is that our Central Metro agent put the interests of everyone else involved above their own. You're a week before closing, you're expecting a commission payment, something starts smelling funny. It's important to remember your ethics and put the safety and security of all parties involved ahead of your own, and make sure that what is taking place is the correct transaction and everybody's behaving ethically, okay? So remember, when in doubt, reach out. The Central Metro Agent Helpline is 737-249-9010. You may call anytime. We're happy to answer any questions. Until next time, we look forward to seeing you at our next 10-minute topic. A quick disclaimer. All information provided in this presentation is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be construed or used as legal advice. Viewers of this presentation should not take any action nor refrain from taking any action based upon content or information found in this presentation. Any person with questions about information contained in this presentation should contact a licensed Texas real estate attorney for a full and complete review of their legal issues.